Since the inception of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change UNFCCC Conference of Parties in 1992, there has been a lot of queries by experts and vulnerable countries about the annual ritual. One of the queries is that the UNFCCC policies as currently being implemented are not yet institutionalized in the countries to parties, expected to rekindle the debate on climate change and financing for the consequences in the public interest that could benefit ideas based on the divergent perspectives of enthusiasts and critics of the program. The UNFCCC needs to harmonize the diverse requirements of parties to transform climate financing into a sustainable project directed to resilience, adaptation, and sustainability. Additionally, UNFCCC needs to direct climate financing to the assistance and strengthening of vulnerable entities across the world. That is the point that's often lost on many industrialized nations. The category of countries to benefit from climate financing is quite different from the category of those who should be target of other socioeconomic interventions, and as climate financing should be framed for the poor and vulnerable countries. For instance, impoverished countries ravaged by flooding will be daily confronted with hunger. They will not be the typical nations for mitigation, as the impoverished nations need immediate intervention. That's why the right policy debate will bring about clarity on the idea of climate financing. The industrialized nations must take definite positions on climate financing and within a broad climate crisis intervention strategy, because it costs a lot to execute climate financing programs in a widespread manner. This is because when countries can adapt to climate crisis, climate financing will work better as the miserable will become resilient. In this regard, it's considered that loss and damage are late in coming given the centrality of carbon emissions and climate change crisis alleviation of the UNFCCC. There was a lot of hesitation on the part of the industrialized nations before this form of climate financing was agreed. Besides, the trajectory of implementation is also reflective of the numerous contradictions in the deadline and pathology of the UNFCCC and climate financing. Now, the necessary debate on climate financing must reckon with previous flaws in the implementation, as some pertinent questions cannot be ignored. They include institutional structures, integrity, transparency, and accountability in the course of implementation. The implementation of loss and damage financing should therefore help in removing these flaws for the purpose of effective policy implementation. When implemented honestly and competently, loss and damage could significantly help the cause of climate financing. And joining us to discuss this in the studio, this very important issue, is Air Vice Marshal Akube Iyamu, President, Association of Environmental Protection Climate Change Experts. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having
Thank you
me.
for being here. You are the right person for us to really have this conversation
Absolutely.
tonight.
Thank you.
With,
Thank
really.
you. Yeah.
Now, since the 1800s, human activities have done a lot to impact climate and indeed climate change. Then let's also look at the inception of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. I mean, the UNFCCC, the Conference of Parties of 1992. What were the recommendations of that conference on climate change?
Yes, there are two bodies. Okay. IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That is the research arm of climate change. Yeah. They also have the UNFCCC. That is the policy arm on the climate change. The whole goal was to reduce greenhouse gas emission to 1.5. And that has been the battle at various conventions, Copenhagen, Marrakesh, and everything. And finally bettered at the Paris Agreement. If you see Article 5, actually speak about this financing. You know, climate financing is quite different from loan. Loan will help you worsen the whole situation.
Why?
Yes, because if you are talking of who need the finance? It's the poor countries. You wanted to go and take loan and come and increase their misery.
Of
No,
course,
it's not.
the loans might
It is
even
not
go in the
possible.
wrong
So
direction.
the developed countries now have moral obligation to continue to provide funds for the developing country to live in a low carbon world. In a low carbon world, so that they can have adaptation and mitigation. That's what we're talking about now. Don't forget, there are various types of climate financing.
Yeah.
No, you have the green financing, you have the sustainable financing. They are all different. Sustainable financing have to do with environmental social governance. So while the green financing have to deal with biodiversity and adaptation and reparation. So again, too, you have the carbon credit. You have the removal of harmful subsidies, such as the one that you have for fossil fuel. And you also have the greening of the finance book. So it is no more an activity issue now. It has been taken over to the central. Our central bank have to be involved.
So we should be looking at implementation beyond what is written in the book. So let's bring it home now to Nigeria and Africa. Just the last COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Of course, we saw the issue of how developing nations can mobilize finance to really fight climate change. And even rich nations did make pledges with regards to paying for climate damages. But the big question everyone is asking, with the global economic downturn, where is the money? And is climate change and the fight against it and the financing to fight it, it seems not to be a priority, not even for developing or even developed nations. So where is the money, and are we prioritizing it enough?
Yeah, it's a priority, big
Those are the
priority.
questions.
Because you see, it is the X factor. No matter how you plan your budget, how beautiful the budget is, climate disruption can render everything to zero. Take, for example, anytime we have flood, you look at Lokoja, the economy of the country is disrupted completely. So you must address climate financing deliberately. What are we talking about? What is climate financing? It is helping developing country to reduce greenhouse emission, so that they will be able to adapt. In that way, you are investing in solar power and every other thing that will make them to increase their adaptation and mitigation. So it has to be a priority for us. Otherwise, because we have taken it out of activism now to planning. IMF is involved, World Bank is involved, everybody is involved. I'm not telling you that. Look, Nigeria, for example, you have 2 out of the 7 longest rivers in Africa. You have 854 shoreline, 854 kilometer shoreline. So you have the biggest mangrove. These are sellable environmental products. But you must continue to increase your infrastructure. You must continue to develop your skill. You must continue to develop your skill. You see, for the climate environment, it is not, okay, no, this is my friend, this is my brother. No. Countries are moving from the mundane to the substantial. They are moving from commission to ministries of climate change. So Nigeria cannot be left
But
left
in all
behind.
of this that you have highlighted, yes, as true as it is, but even the climate accord, due to the global energy crisis, especially in Europe, recently occasioned by the Russian-Ukraine war, we saw even countries that have actually signed up to the 2050 emissions accord. But at the end of the day, we're seeing them even retract and go back to even coal, which we've moved away from. So the big question is, how realistic are some of these things that we come up with when, climate activists meet and say, okay, this is the way to go with, when you juxtapose that with the reality on ground with regards to economies of nations, be it developed or developing?
See, the use of fossil fuel will continue to be there. You see, when you talk of Africa, like Nigeria now, they just released a report a couple of days ago, investment in renewable energy, 80% in the world. Nigeria had only 1%. So these people giving you climate finance, because here we are looking at it every time we always come back to come and take the fund from the envelope budget. When you take the fund from the envelope budget, you are short-changing health, you are short-changing education, you are short-changing all human endeavor, and you are causing food insecurity and health insecurity. The funds are there. You need the right engagement. You need the right capacity to engage it and bring it out. You have the concessional fund. You have the low interest fund. They are all there. No nation fund is climate disaster from envelope budget.
Now let me jump in right there.
Yes.
Now talking about enveloped budgets and spending the right money in the right direction.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about green financing.
Yes.
Adaptation and reparation.
Yes.
When developing countries better adapt, then the funding can be better spent, can be spent more judiciously. How can we better adapt? And let's also look at reparation. How can we engage in more reparations?
See, the problem that has been with climate financing all over the place. The international management of climate financing has always had three pillars: adaptation, mitigation, and means of administering that fund. Don't forget, we have always been coming with the baggage of transparency and transparency. Now, the people are looking at you, okay, this fund, when it comes, what are you going to do with it?
Exactly.
What are you going to do with it? So, again, too, it is no more, they want to see what you are selling. How are you reducing your carbon? Don't forget, this country was the first in Africa. 2017.
Yeah, the sovereign green bond.
The sovereign green bond. 2019, 10.69 and 15 billion. And the fourth in the world. So the country has done a lot. But what we now do is that it's the right capacity now. We're talking about the right capacity to move the climate effort forward. We cannot continue to fund it from the envelope budget. No, you are reducing a whole lot of things. Get people to go out. Climate change has now become diplomacy. It has become advocacy. It is no more we are carrying placard and everything. No, what are you bringing to the table?
Absolutely.
To the crucible, yeah.
Great place for us to drop the ankle, but at the end of the day, I remember between 2013 and 2019, only 7% that Nigeria and, sub-Saharan Africa actually received looking at climate financing. But at the end of the day, the little you get, how are you utilizing it?
How did you spend it?
Is the question. For more transparency.
So we need more transparency.
We have to say thank you so much. Yes. Great place for us to drop the anchor and say well done, for all that you do. And of course, we appreciate you for coming. Air Vice Marshal Akugbe Iyamu, of course, he is the President, Association of Environmental Protection and Climate Change Experts. Well,